Call this meeting to order. Let me start, as I always do, acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. This is meeting 7 of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources. As you know, the meeting is taking place in hybrid format, pursuant to the standing orders. We have a number of folks on Zoom today, including one of our committee members. And I'd just like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Also, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. And for those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. And a reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. Do remember, everyone, our incredible interpreters, and take it easy on their ears. Place your earpiece when you're not using it on the decal in front of you, and please try not to speak too quickly. Before we start, colleagues, the last day we had talked about the number of witnesses that we had to accommodate, and we are absolutely going to need a 7th meeting. Some of your top priority witnesses, which we actually saved to the end and scheduled, will be able to make it if we have that last meeting. Also, we need to give drafting instructions to our amazing analysts. So we will need that meeting, and then we will start the forestry study promptly on the Thursday, right? On the Thursday, and we're lining up witnesses, and this gives the clerk just a little bit more time to line us up some panels, colleagues. So with your leave, we will proceed in that fashion. And pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Thursday, September 18th, the committee will resume its study of the development of critical minerals in Canada. I would like to welcome our witnesses, both online and in person. Mark Story, President and CEO of Defence Metals Corporation. And I see you, Mark. Nice to see you. Jeff Stibbard, CEO of JDS Mining and Energy. Thanks for joining us, Jeff. And Robin Goad, President and CEO of Fortune Minerals Limited, also online. You will each have 5 minutes or less for your opening remarks, and we're going to start with Mr. Tory. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name's Mark Tory, President and CEO of Defence Metals Corp. I have over 30 years experience in the resources industry and nearly 11 years in rare earths, and I moved to Canada in January of this year just to take this role. Defence Metals is a Canadian company focused on developing rare earth elements. Our flagship project is the 100% owned Wichita Rare Earth Element Project, which is about 80 kilometres from Prince George in British Columbia. Wichita is one of the most advanced high-grade rare earth projects in North America, and outside of MP Materials, which is an operating rare earth mine in the US, the only North American rare earth company with reserves, not just resources. An April 2025 pre-feasibility study confirmed our strong economics and world-class mineralogy. Our rare earth concentrate is among the highest grade globally with excellent recoveries. The deposit is rich in neodymium and praseodymium, which are 2 essential elements used in permanent magnets that go into electric vehicle motors, wind turbines, military applications, clean tech and robotics. One of our advantages is our location and the infrastructure around it. We're road accessible, we're near rail, we've got hydropower, gas lines, and not too far from the port of Prince Rupert. We've also got a skilled local workforce in the Prince George region. Our project is ready now for the next step, which is the definitive feasibility study. We've completed the PFS, we've done the hydromet plant, pilot plant test work with product sampling, and we're in commercial discussions with numerous downstream processors. With proper support, we hope to keep 100% of the value chain in Canada, including all hydrometallurgical and separation. We've signed an MOU with a European processor to buy a significant share of Wichita's future production. Indigenous partnership is at the heart of our project. We signed a co-design agreement with the McLeod Lake Indian Band in 2023, and in 2024, the McLeod Lake Indian Band became an equity partner, acquiring 2.6 million shares in Defence Metals. This is a real and growing partnership and a model for economic reconciliation. We also have strong support from the province of British Columbia. The BC Minister of Mining has written in support of our Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund application, and the Premier has been engaged and vocally supportive. Overall, the government has recognised the project as one of very high interest, and the project is seen as vital to BC's clean economy and reconciliation goals. Our ask today is clear and time sensitive. Companies in our situation need investment to complete critical work such as the DFS. This funds key engineering, permitting, environmental and technical studies, and without this step, Canadian projects risk delay while allies and competitors move ahead. Price floors, as are being contemplated, are also good policy. This will help protect against unfair Chinese competition and their attempts to quash our industry until a market pricing system is in place outside of China. These price floors would improve project economics, helping the full investment decision and attract external investment. China currently controls over 70% of global rare earths and over 90% of the downstream industries. They've imposed new export restrictions, and Canada has named rare earths as a critical mineral priority. Now we need action. So Wichita is Canada's opportunity to build a domestic REE supply chain from mine to magnet. And we're ready to lead this effort with our partners, but we can't do it alone and need the federal government working with our allies to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tory, a brave man to move to Canada in January. Colleagues, just for your reference, DFS is Definitive Feasibility Study, and so I just ask...
My apologies.
No problem. We get a lot of acronyms around the table here. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Tory. And we're going to open it up to... Oh, we're going to... right. Sorry about that. Now on to Mr. Stibbard. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's good to see you all today, and I want to thanks for inviting me to testify to this committee. I have come today to add value and support to the important Canadian initiative. I look forward to our collective efforts yielding tangible actions and outcomes that enables us to increase responsible, profitable resource development in all categories of Canadian mineral resource sector, including strategic minerals. And I might add, strategic minerals, by Canada's definition, is about 32, United States about 55. In Canada, we're lucky to have abundance of those. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a professional mining engineer. I've been doing this for 40 plus years in Canada, throughout the north, coast to coast, and around the world. I founded a company called JDS Energy and Mining, based in Vancouver, BC consultants and contractors to the global mining industry. My experience includes designing, building, financing, permitting, operating and reclaiming mines in Canada and worldwide, both as a contractor to and direct owner of these mining assets. I have had the opportunity and pleasure to be directly involved in the senior leadership and development of several of Canada's premier mining assets, including the Akati Diamond Mine, Albion Sands Oil Sands Mine, and many others in the energy, copper, gold, silver, lead, zinc, and zirconium space. Our portfolio of mining projects includes major equity partnership interests with local First Nations that continue to advance capacity and trust in this important aspect of our industry. My input today is based on my own personal observations from working in the Canadian resource industry. I've had a terrific experience of living in 12 northern towns across the country. I want to see other young Canadians from all parts of the country experience the exceptional career opportunities, diverse lifestyles, and cultures coming together to make strong communities, strong families, and strong individuals. I see this path continually threatened by misguided government leadership of platitudes, expanding bureaucracy, and a deficit of understanding and inspiration of the benefits and the perceived risks of the industry. Frankly, we don't need any more programs, committees, or processes. We need less. We can look to our past to go forward. We need to update Canadians on the mining and critical mineral opportunities that we presently have that are well documented both provincially and federally. I believe many of these resource opportunities are stranded and yet potentially commercial in their near term, requiring political leadership willing to lead the initiative to do so. Specifically, mineral assets north of the 60th parallel that are logistically and due to lack of energy stranded. An example being Isaac Lake, technically stranded as a result of Canada falling behind in processing technology investment in that, necessary to be competitive worldwide. We haven't built a new copper smelter, something we need to do. Limited leaching initiatives, REE processing, which we just heard about, and zirconium and hafnium. Politically stranded because of narrow platitudes defining unrealistic outcomes born beyond our borders. Our willingness to follow along on this path, UNDRIP would be an example. Socioeconomically stranded, where current education misinforms and underreaches potential young industry participants and local stakeholders of what is current and what we can do be the true future benefits and impacts. Lack of forward-looking empowered leadership. Leadership inspiration lays out the case for growing individual, community, and national potential. Examples of northern and offshore oil and gas resource discoveries previously shut in or under moratorium, critical to resource development success. Vast resources of shut in due to lack of infrastructure, large-scale power production and distribution, roads, ports, rails, and purpose-built communities, all required for the industry. The stats for Canadian mining and mineral sector, well known, over 117 billion, or 4% of the Canadian GDP. Adding in oil, that brings us close to 8%. Employment, over 43,000 directly involved in the mining business. Indirectly, another 280, up to 700,000 people. 1 in every 28 jobs in Canada relies on mining. So I don't have to explain how important it is. The fact that we export a record $151 billion of mining, of which gold is the top ranked mineral value with production valued at $14 billion today, probably twice that. Critical minerals as a subset, in 2023, $30 billion of the economy was contributed by critical minerals, and nearly 55,000 people employed in that. Overall, stability. Despite global economic challenges and health challenges because of the global pandemic, mining remains a stable and significant part of Canadian economy. Mines remained unshuttered through pandemic, even expanded. Its contribution has remained stable consistently throughout Canada since 2011. What has changed? Canada usually works best when the two levels of government stick to their constitutional lanes. Mineral resource development is a provincial domain and should remain. Effects of the federal government, such as Bill C-69, carbon tax, pollution abatement, and energy regulation, have hampered the attractiveness of our industry. Let's honestly and comprehensively dive into these negative effects and undo them to the benefit of Canada, and not be sidelined with this worldwide competitive space and source of real wealth creation. Canada can and must be a leading producer of strategic minerals. Opportunities to improve our resource production business value exist by embracing examples of best-in-class modern socioeconomic resource development, such as carried out in Norway in the LNG space, Swedish copper smelting technology and cooperative trans-provincial infrastructure, public-private development and the likes of co-development of necessary mining infrastructure with the necessary military infrastructure as a support. Construction of far north ports, modern communities, ocean, air, road, and rail transportation logistics, energy fuels, energy production, communication, education, affordable living can all be examples of codependent industry, government, and military priority. I give the example of the towns of Yellowknife, Fort McMurray, Tumble Ridge, towns born out of industry. It's a call to action. It's important to industry to lead based on best perspective to define the technical requirements and economic outcomes. Government must provide the impetus to bring the industry to the table with a clear pathway of increased, immediate, and attractive opportunity. Nation building but profitable and without ambiguous external threats and barriers to success. Timeline to development currently unacceptable. This is primarily a result of an overly bureaucratic process of review.
Yeah. Mr. Stibbert, if I could ask you to finish up. I know there'll be questions where you can bring out the rest of your... But
Sure,
if you got a few last thoughts there.
Two more pages here and I'm done.
No.
Timeline to development.
You're already 2 minutes over, so just out of respect for other witnesses, why don't you take 30 seconds to finish up?
Okay, let me just finish the thought there, please.
Sure, finish your thought.
Yeah, so the timeline to development, which is the most important threat.
Okay.
currently unacceptable. The primary result of overly bureaucratic process of review and input considerations leading to uncertainty of approval, in turn becoming a serious risk to economic outcome and driving investment away at the earliest and most critical stage of a project gestation. It's unattractive. When I built Takati Mine in 1994, it was discovered in 92, geologically determined in 94, in operation by 1998. That mine, 5 years from really geological exploration to construction and operation, generated and created an industry that generated over 80% of the GDP of the Northwest Territories. This is never going to be matched again. It created an industry. And that's the timeline that we'd like to get back to, instead of today's timeline of 10 to 15 years, which drives away business.
Thank you. I'm sure Mrs. Stubbs will ask you to amplify. Yeah, invite you to expand.
Sure.
Anyway, thank you for your testimony. Very,
You got her.
Very interesting. Thank you. And then we have one more witness, Mr. Goad. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the rest of the committee. Just on point from Jeff's very detailed presentation, I have provided a detailed PowerPoint. It was sent to you on Friday. I understand it's in translation, so you probably have not received that, but I couldn't possibly deliver all the recommendations I would in 5 minutes. So I'm going to concentrate right now just telling you a little bit about who we are and sort of concentrate also on the high notes. So my name's Robin Goad. I'm the president and CEO of Fortune Minerals Limited. We're a Toronto Stock Exchange listed company that owns the vertically integrated NICO cobalt, gold, bismuth, copper project, which is comprised of a planned mine and concentrator up in the Northwest Territories and a hydrometallurgical refinery in just outside of Edmonton, Alberta, which will process our concentrates through to value-added products. One of the highlights I'd like to mention is the importance of midstream processing. I'll touch on that a little later, because if we don't process our minerals here in Canada, then they're lost. Simply producing concentrate, shipping those to Asia, we don't have custody and control of the metals, and therefore those metals are not available for our industry here in Canada, which is really the most important thing we're trying to achieve in incubating a critical minerals industry here in Canada. So our project has a 20-year mineral reserve, but being an IOCG type deposit, that stands for iron oxide copper gold, analogous to the giant Olympic Dam mine in Australia, we have the opportunity to find 1 billion tons of metal, just realistically. But right now we have a 20-year reserve, which will be the primary source of feed for the hydrometallurgical refinery in the Edmonton area. We also have a process collaboration with Rio Tinto, where we will take waste residues from the Kennecott smelter in Utah and process those through to value-added products in Edmonton. So another good example of build it and they will come. So having downstream or midstream processing here in Canada will attract other sources of feeds to be able to be processed and available to our industry. Our project is very advanced. We've spent $150 million to date, and we are in the process of updating our bankable feasibility study, feed engineering, as well as doing some metallurgical optimization. 3 critical minerals are hosted in the deposit, cobalt being traditionally the most dominant metal, but we also have 1.1 million ounces of gold, which today is worth just a little over 5 billion Canadian dollars in the ground. We have the largest deposit of bismuth in the world with 12% of global reserves. That's an important metal used in environmental applications as well as some important defense applications. The cobalt, of course, will go into rechargeable batteries, which will enable the energy transition and the transformation of the auto industry to e-mobility. We were the very first project to receive a U.S. Defense Department grant, first Canadian project to receive a grant, and that was quickly matched by the Canadian government. We've got about $17 million in support coming primarily from the U.S. Department of Defense and Natural Resources Canada, but we also have a small grant that also comes from Alberta Innovates. So the government of Alberta is also contributing to our project. We have tremendous support for our project, both through Indigenous relationships. We have cooperation agreements with the Tlicho, who have a settled land claim with the governments of Canada and the Northwest Territories. We're hoping to be, with the work that's being partially funded by governments, we hope to be at a construction decision in late 2026. There are a number of recommendations that we would like to point out, and also some challenges. But probably just to start off, exploration is a very high-risk industry. Only 1 in 1,000 projects is successfully developed into a mine. Only 1 in 3,000 projects is a Tier 1 asset. We've allowed our mining industry to deteriorate for a number of reasons. And I think the biggest threat to our industry is that we don't have a pipeline of new projects to be developed to maintain the knowledge and expertise that we've developed here in Canada. There are certainly challenges with manipulation of metal prices from China and other actors. So we think there's a role for government in that. Jeff mentioned the importance of infrastructure development, particularly in Canada's north. We're working in the Northwest Territories, so we think that's very important in developing projects in the north, where 45% of GDP comes from the resource industry.
Yeah, Mr.
Goad,
we're at time, and you'll have a chance to amplify with questions coming from the committee. So we will now finally start round of questions, and we're going to start with Mrs. Stubbs. Mrs. Stubbs.
Thank you, Chair.
For 6 minutes.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate all the witnesses being here, and I do encourage all of you to submit written submissions for consideration of the committee, because, as one witness pointed out, the time constraints on us are always crazy here for a substantive conversation. Thank you all for being here, and all of you, to some degree or another, pointed out how critical mineral development in Canada is being held back by government red tape and bureaucracy, but is also absolutely inextricably linked with national security, job creation, and affordability for all Canadians everywhere. Mr. Stibber, given your extensive experience as an individual or private sector proponent, also as an advisor, I wonder is it your general view that the regulatory environment for energy and mining proponents has deteriorated over the last 10 years? And I would invite you to expand more on some of your recommendations for clarity and certainty so that big projects can be built by individual private sector proponents and companies, not taxpayers.
Yeah, exactly. And the answer is yes. So yes, it has deteriorated, as I mentioned, from 1994 to 1998, building a Cuddy mine and mines after that, shortly thereafter that, was roughly around 5 years from substantial resource discovery. So like Robin said, the 1 in 3,000 number to construction. And today that's numbers more like 15 years. And so the problem, and again, Robin pointed out, or Mr. Gold pointed out quite accurately, a lot of money goes into the exploration and might never come back out. So there's a big risk just on that, on the odds. And if you know that you're faced with 15 years of regulatory review, for a lot of inputs that aren't necessarily reflective of the area or the impacts of the area, people just turn away. We're not attractive, and you can imagine that's all Canada needs to be. We used to be attractive, and that's why I'm here today. I'm trying to make Canada mining attractive for outside investors to come, because we need a lot of capital, and that's really the number one threat to our success.
And this same government several years ago announced a so-called critical mineral strategy. But as you've pointed out, Canada has fallen far behind major global mining competitors, and we're in a race to get to global markets. Do you have comments on the disproportionate red tape or timelines that proponents face in Canada, say compared to the United States or other major global mining competitors?
Right. I think, first of all, we got the two levels of government, provincial and federally. And the federal process makes us consider things that are almost coast to coast in potential impact. It's not relevant, and again, it's not, you don't need to cast the net that wide to see that. I get it. We're one Canadian economy. That's what it all rolls up to. But we're a microcosm of culture and economies across the way. And certain people do things differently in other parts of the region. We do not break the law. That's the rule, whether they're provincial or federal. So that's a standard. But we don't need to get input from all corners of the country, including things like gender and the likes of that. Those are just way too deep for people to consider all the potential impacts that might reflect. But I can tell you the mining business is very, very progressive in terms of employment of males, females, and others. And I've personally experienced the changes throughout my career over 42 years in the mining business, and how the workforce has changed, the participation of people have changed, including First Nations to be directly involved, direct owners. Over 14,000 First Nations in Canada make their living in the mining business directly. That's the largest employer of First Nations by any sector.
Exactly.
So we don't need to be sort of told by up high or out east, all due respect, how we should manage our affairs. So that's a big impediment, and that's impediment to investment. Outsiders, and I work around the world. 50% of my business is outside of Canada. People outside of Canada ask me all the time, what's happening? And I can't tell them. I can't tell them what our direction is anymore. So that is an impediment, real or perceived, which it's a bit of both. We need to correct that, and that's what we need to do. We need to put our shoulders to the wheel, correct the process, make it simple, make it rigorous as far as its outcome, and win. We need to win the attractiveness game so we can bring the capital here. I just finished building a diamond mine in South Africa, Botswana. 5 years, same thing, start to finish 5 years. So
5 years.
What I was doing 30 years ago in Canada,
takes 15 to 18.
yeah. So I don't. I have to make a living. My employees have to be working. So I got to go where the money is. I'd prefer not to. So.
And that's the reality. That's the travesty that these government-imposed red tape and roadblocks, they drive jobs and investment like yours into other countries. So would you say that part of the actual fix would be actually to fix and repeal bills like C-69, who stand in the way of infrastructure being built up, for example, to the Ring of Fire that are First Nations led and initiated, yet it's C-69 that is holding back even that basic infrastructure and other development. Are there any other recommendations you would make to increase the timelines so that big projects can actually get built in Canada?
30 seconds.
Yes, I could, and I have them written down, and I can just submit them to you, maybe so that I can not stumble through that. But I just want to add one other aspect to it, and that's the inspiration of young people in Canada, Southerners looking north and looking and realizing that the North is our future. It was our front door when the explorers came here. That's how they came here. And we need to look back at that again. When the fur trade fizzled out, we moved south, but we got to get back to that, and we got to inspire young people. You can't afford a property in Toronto or Vancouver? Move. Move north, get some experience, make a good living, enjoy yourself, meet some people from all over the country, and build Canada. That's what we have to do. And that comes from education at the university level, the high school level, elementary school level, and the communities. The government needs to enforce that.
Thank you both. Thank you both. And we're on to Mr. McKinnon for 6 minutes. Mr. McKinnon.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to talk about regulations, but I think Ms. Stubbs has dealt with that fairly well. So I'm going to focus on, I'm going to talk to Mr. Tory. I'm going to ask you about the Wichita mine. You mentioned that China has 70% of the world's minerals in this respect, in critical mineral production, and I wonder how we can make projects such as Wichita take a substantial chunk of that business. What is standing in the way?
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. It's a great question. From our PFS study that we did for Wichita, our output would be roughly 7 to 9% of global production. So it is a significant operation. Obviously, we've already talked about regulations in relation to permitting. So that's obviously one thing that could be a stumbling block for us. But obviously, the second part also comes from that first part in relation to permitting, is the attraction of money to be able to build it. So, I'm not one of these people that sit here and just put their hands out to the government and say, you've got to help us in relation to funding this. It's obviously nice to get support from the government, but at the end of the day, we have to attract enough investors who think the project's attractive, is going to be up and running as quickly as possible, because everyone wants cash flow, right? So everyone wants to get to cash flow, and if they think that the project itself is not going to be cash flow positive until 5, 7, 10 years down the track because of permitting issues or anything else like that, we don't attract the investment to be able to build it. From our PFS, we're talking about a $1.4 billion capital project.
Would you suggest we would streamline the permitting process to make that more effective and faster?
Absolutely. That's been part of my discussions in the 9 months I've been here in Canada is trying to get things in relation to permitting to move concurrently, so it does fasten the permitting process. But again, it's still working within the parameters of making sure you have the support of the local community and you're doing everything right within the environment. We're not trying to run over anyone in relation to the environmental standards or communities. We want all of that to be ticked off as well, but we just want it to be done quicker.
So I did a quick look up of the Wichita mine. It looks like it's around 100 miles northeast of Yellowknife. What's that like getting equipment up there? Is there decent roads? I mean, in winter, roads aren't as reliable as once they were. What kind of volume of ore do you have to move out of there? How do you do that? What do you need to make that work?
Yeah, we're obviously in the early stages because it's a PFS, so we're not moving anything at this point in time. But for us, we're lucky. We've got forestry roads that go all the way to the mine, so we have access to it, through winter, through summer. When we talk about how much product we're going to take out, I mean, we're going to build our beneficiation plant there, so we're not talking a lot of product that needs to move. But we're obviously going to need that road infrastructure upgraded for us to be able to get the project up and running.
Like working with the territorial government and the federal government as well in tandem.
Sorry, I missed the first part.
Working with the territorial government and the federal government together and individually, what's that like?
Yeah, discussions are happening at the moment, and it's around who takes control over that whole permitting process, because the size of our mine at the moment means it's a federal environmental process and permitting process, whereas when I was in Ottawa and talking to federal people, they were telling me that they would push it down to the provincial level anyway, and most of the work would be done at the province. So it's really us talking to the provincial level and making sure that the federal government doesn't take its time just signing off on the work that's done by the provincial government.
So are you going to be able to build power generation facilities up there, or do you need to? Or are you going to be able to bring power in from somewhere else?
Yeah, the power should come from the hydro power line that's up there. We're not far from that. So that's a discussion that we'll be having with the relevant company. So
what kind of time frame are you looking at currently for this project to come online?
Well, I always say to people and potential investors is if all the planets align and everything works properly and you get all the money at the right timing, we look to start construction in probably 2027, 28 to be in production sort of 29, 30.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Ron, we'll have to move on. Thank you. Monsieur Simon, pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure that you can hear me, Mr. Tory. Can you hear me? Can you hear the interpretation? Yes? Great. Great, thank you. So, from what I gather, you have a rare earth project. Given my somewhat limited experience in this particular area, but there are a number of elements, and the procedures you follow are complex. What I understand is that there's a relatively high risk, and a consortium, in fact, that was here between Vital, Metal, Commerce Resources, and other players are trying to set up a consortium which would de-risk rare earth projects. Is this something you'd be interested in?
Thank you, Mr. Samad. Yes, I'm part of that consortium. Defence Metals are part of that consortium as well. Joined that in March this year when we first brought it together, and it's certainly something for me, like having been in the industry for 11 years, is that my view of the rare earth world is that there should only be about 5 or 6 really large hydrometallurgical facilities for rare earths globally outside of China. There's already one in the US at Mountain Pass, and I think there needs to be one more in North America. And for the size that we're doing, we're talking about potentially using ours as the bigger one, but then building it slightly larger so that it will take feeds from other sources.
Ouais. Merci beaucoup. Moi,
Thank you very much. Based on the information, well, actually, the information I'd like from you is the following. I understand it is complex to go from rare earth elements to something permanent. I know it's quite complex. If we want to do this, what kind of infrastructure do we need? In Quebec, we have Métaux Sangat that seems quite to be moving ahead quite quickly, and this is in no way a statement about competition or anything, but they seem to be moving fast. I understand that the procedures are complex. What kind of infrastructure, in terms of research, development, the deployment of these critical minerals, what is required to have so that projects like yours can work in Quebec and in Canada? So we have projects like Métaux Sangat that. Listen, I'm sorry, I'm belaboring this, but do we have the current ecosystem in place in Canada to do this processing of rare earth?
We don't have it currently. There's no really large hydromet facility that would be economic that's been built yet. I think that's what we're all contemplating at the moment. When you talk about it being technical and difficult, this is obviously being done around the world. China's been doing all of this for a number of years. Lynas has been doing it with a deposit out of Australia and processing in Malaysia. MP Materials have been doing it down in the US near California, Nevada. So these are processes that we know about, and we're not talking about anything brand new. We're talking about things that people do know how to do. We're using the best people possible. We've got a metallurgist consultant, John Good, who's in his 70s, but he's been around the industry and been working in rare earths and separation, since the sort of the 70s and 80s. So he's been around for a long time. He knows what he's talking about. He understands the flow sheets. The one thing I will say in relation to what we need to do in Canada is we'll have the ability to build these. What we don't have is the experience to be able to run them. China's done a great job in making sure they've got all of their universities that are developing and producing chemical engineers that are able to run hydrometallurgical plants and separation plants. And that's the one thing I think we need to do in Canada, is to make sure that we get all of those in place now for us to be able to service industries in 5, 7, 10 years' time.
Donc, si je vous comprends bien,
if I understand correctly, tomorrow morning, if I'm extrapolating, tomorrow morning there's a rare earth mine that starts running and operating over the short and medium term. It could do concentrates, and to do some processing, it will take a number of steps to develop the expertise associated with this transforming or processing this concentrate, correct?
Yeah, I mean, our PFS goes to a state that we call a carbonate, which has pretty pure rare earth elements in it, and mainly neodymium and praseodymium, which go into the permanent magnets for the EV industry, for wind turbines, robotics, etc. The next stage down from what we had in our PFS is to have a fully separated, what we call neodymium and praseodymium oxide, and then they would be sold directly to metal makers who then sell on to magnet makers, where the magnets then go into those EVs and wind turbines.
Thanks. So, colleagues, we're going to go on to our second round. Mr. Tucker, Mr. Gay, 5 minutes each, and then Monsieur Simard again, 2.5. We'll start with you, Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Stippard, just to unpack a little bit more of your project in Northwest Territories. I understand it was something like 80% of the GDP that was created in the Northwest Territories came from that project. Just talk about a little bit of the infrastructure that was built for that project up there, because we know that with the dual use for our defense of the Arctic comes from a lot from the private sector right now. Can you unpack that a little bit of what that project provided quickly?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, 80% of the GDP was from the diamond industry itself. So the mine started it, and the second one that came on board and the third one that came on board became 80% of the GDP of the Northwest Territories, and that including the sorting facilities and outside contractors to support the mine. So that mine was built ice road, primarily first by aviation supported and airstrip and building a Herc strip and 737 landing strip, and then ice road to get going in a camp and major infrastructure. It became, I think, the 5th largest town in the Northwest Territories. It had the largest telephone exchange, most modern water treatment, 3-stage water treatment that didn't exist in the Northwest Territories, both incoming and outgoing. Town of about 1,600 people, modern, obviously, facilities, recreation, and food, and most importantly, the work, the paychecks.
Those paychecks are important, but this infrastructure, the Allies are trusting us to protect our North. Canadians are trusting our government to protect the North, and the dual use that comes from industry helps us build out our ability to defend ourselves in the North. We used to have a system where private sector would invest in the North, and through the dual use of this infrastructure, we would be a stronger, more able to defend our borders against enemies. Fast forward to now, and it takes 18 years officially to get a mine up and running in Canada. There's nothing that's going to be backfilling right now those diamond mines up in the north, which have a negative effect on that infrastructure that we need to obtain. So then Canadians from all over Canada have to pay their taxes, and the government's going to have to or they're proposing to spend billions and billions of dollars in the north to keep that infrastructure up, which makes no sense at all. It is frustrating to know that it's mostly regulation that we've heard from countless witnesses that have layering effect that has killed this industry and ability to expand. Another office, government office they're talking about is the Major Projects Office. What is your views on that project? Is it needed?
Again, it's just another layer, and I'd just like to echo the point on the infrastructure. There's a phenomenal asset in Canada's north on Baffinland called the Mary River Iron Mine, Baffinland Mining. It has a port there right now, and it ships about 6 million tons of iron ore direct. It's in the process of trying to get an expansion to go to 12,000 to make it economical. Really, it's uneconomical at today's prices and throughput. A phenomenal shared resource for potential military. Obviously, there's power, there's infrastructure for living, communications, and shipping. But this group has been forced to build a port on the other side of the Baffin Island on the west coast inland, 120 some odd kilometers away, in the interest of environmental impacts that I think are a little bit overstated. So, national interest. There's a reason that we should be pushing that, not just for the jobs and the economy of that project, but an ideal spot for a port for the Navy and Air
It's
Force.
interesting you bring up the national interest because we just had C5 and we tried to get amendments in there that forced the government to actually have a definition of national interest, and they wouldn't do that. And you just outlined a perfect one that would be in national interest that would make sense, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could as well, you know, the projects that received some money, the McIlvany Bay and in Saskatchewan and up in British Columbia, Red Chris, two existing projects that have been funded and are well underway and permitted. And so I don't know what the impetus was to add money to something that already exists. We're trying to get the ball rolling, not add fuel to it. And quite
I agree
frankly,
with that, and I just
taxpayers' money.
I agree, and I just want one last question, and it's actually we should be celebrating. It's the first Canadian-owned manufacturing facility making high-tech rare earths-based magnets for use in electric vehicles. All Canadians should be celebrating because it's the first Canadian-owned manufacturing facility. Unfortunately, it's not in Canada; it's in Estonia. What do you think about that? That it's easier to get permitting done in the EU versus in Canada?
Brief answer, please.
I think it's obvious what I think about it, and you know, it just needs to be stopped. Again, back to being, we need to be attractive. That's the bottom line, and attractive means policies, procedures, and obviously the will to make these things happen. And our young people that are signing up to meet the challenge of technology, it's an exciting business, but it's not known enough. We're not doing enough to encourage people to join the party and advance technology. Like I said, copper smelting. We've only got one left in the country. We need to build another one. We need to embrace that into the most modern technology, take it from afar, whether it's Sweden or Estonia or Slovakia, wherever it comes from, we can bring it here.
Thanks, Mr. Stibbert. We're going to go on to Mr. Gay for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. This question is for Mr. Tory and Mr. Goat. So I'm starting with Mr. Tory. We've all talked and heard about the Chinese manipulating the market, both for rare earth, but also other critical minerals. There's also, I've heard mention of MP, also the U.S. company that's being supported by the U.S. government. U.S. government being also on a race to secure rare earth and critical mineral. We announced, as part of the G7, the Minister of Energy and Resources here in Canada announced potential offtake agreement or stockpiling, ideas like that. I'm interested in you both, your idea. Talk to me about the dynamics in between China, U.S., the role that Canada can play, and how the government can help you play that role. So starting with Mr. Tory.
Thank you. Look, China's been doing this for a long, long time. And, you know, I tip my hat to them. They haven't been silent about it. If you go through their 5-year plans, they talk about the fact they want to dominate the rare earth industry and the downstream processing related to the rare earth industry. And they've been manipulating prices over that period of time. I've been saying for over 10 years now that the Western world needs to come up with a different pricing mechanism for rare earths outside of China. And the unfortunate fact around that is that, you know, China's dominates the whole downstream industry to have over 90% of magnet manufacturing. And what the Western world needs to do, which includes Canada, and the way that I see it in Canada, is we've got to build the whole downstream processing ability, which goes right through to magnet manufacturing, to be able to supply the Western world. And that's not an easy thing because, you know, you've got to grow industries such as the magnet makers, and you talk about Estonia, you know, get those built here. Get the metal makers that supply the magnet industry to actually be built in Canada. And then you've got, you know, resources like ours that then have the ability to actually to supply those manufacturers, and there's no need for China. That's where we need to head. You know, and for the government, the issue that we have is, as you know, junior companies, as we're called, you even though I don't see us as junior, we've got a really strong management team and board, but it's money. And, we need help to get through to do the feasibility study. We'll be able to fund with the help of government. I mean, we've already got a letter of interest from EDC for $250 million US in relation to funding our capital costs. But, we need to get through the feasibility study. The feasibility study will cost us, between $30 and $50 million to do because it's a $1.4 billion capital project. We want to do it properly. So we're looking for help on the feasibility study costings.
Can I ask Mr. Gold?
Yeah, a very complex and interesting question, Mr. Gay. First of all, just our two metals, cobalt, about 75% of the global mine supply comes from the not-so-democratic Republic of the Congo, and about 60% of that mine production is controlled by Chinese state-owned enterprises. China controls over, I think it's 83% of all cobalt refining and 90% of cobalt chemical supply. And this is a result of a proactive, active investment strategy, which is, you're dealing with essentially the Chinese government, and they just don't operate on the same economic models that we do. With respect to bismuth, which we have 12% of the global reserves, China controls 80% of the mine supply, 90% of the refining supply. The challenge has been that overproduction, particularly of cobalt by China, has driven the price down to a point where it's not economic to be extracting cobalt in many parts of the world. And the Democratic Republic of the Congo actually got wise to that and start putting export quotas, because what they're effectively doing is overproducing, driving the price down to below the cost of production. And that enables their industry, which captures all that metal, to produce electric cars at a discount to the global market. So where they lose on maybe the mineral production, they're gaining on selling back manufactured goods
Thank
to
you.
us. And
Thank you.
Am I being cut off?
Yes, you are being cut off, Mr.
Okay.
Gold. Ever so politely, though. Yeah. Thank you so much. Very interesting. And
Can I have
Monsieur
one
Simard,
very brief point, Mr. Chairman?
you can come back. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
2.5 minutes, Monsieur Simard.
Je vais vous donner
Mr. Gold, I'll give you the opportunity to get back to your point, but quickly, I don't have much time. I have a couple of very quick questions for you. A number of witnesses have referred to the difficulty in going through the feasibility study. You yourself were mentioning this, and Mr. Goat, both Mr. Goat and Mr. Tory were mentioning this. Could you tell the committee what could actually be done tangibly to help you get through this feasibility study? What kind of support? And then the other aspect is to do with infrastructure. Many infrastructure projects fail to get off the ground because there's no infrastructure to get these minerals out of the ground. What could be done to help you out when it comes to infrastructure? I know these are two major questions. You don't have much time, but I'd like to hear both of you. Mr. Tory, Mr. Goad.
Merci, Monsieur Simard. I will try and answer these very quickly. One of the things that I would just make one comment I would have made is that we've given tremendous subsidies to the battery industry, and there was no requirement for domestically sourced raw materials to be used in those that came along with that. Those subsidies, and I would argue that would have been something that could have been easily done. Feasibility studies, I have an actionable item. We have a big gap between what's called Canadian exploration expense and Canadian development expense, if you're familiar with flow-through financing. I would add that we should enable the expenditures associated with feasibility studies, environmental baseline studies, the indigenous engagement, detailed engineering, and piloting should all be allowable Canadian exploration expense to help companies navigate the feasibility process. Now, ourselves, we've received funding primarily from the U.S. Department of Defense to fund our feasibility study, but we were in a period where the markets were effectively closed for 5 years, and we didn't advance our project because we just couldn't raise money to do those studies. That has been resolved from the government support, which we appreciate, both from Canada as well as the U.S.
Thank you, Mr. Goad. We have to move on to our two next questioners. And remember also to our witnesses, please submit a brief with any additional information you want to provide. It will be considered by the committee and the analysts, and we would appreciate that. So thank you. This is just to keep us on time. We have another set of witnesses coming in about 10 minutes. So thanks so much. Now on to Mr. Mallette for 5 minutes, and ending this second round with Mr. Hogan for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Question to Mr. Tory. You were asked a question on infrastructure, and you got me thinking here about, you mentioned that, well, some of your infrastructure was logging roads. Sometimes something that is often forgotten is that forestry has opened up the country with their logging roads, and opened it for exploration and for building mines. And I know at least of a dozen mines within the region I live in. So I'd like to remind the committee it's something we shouldn't forget. Now, to Mr. Tory, how important is it to have these two industries to work together?
I've asked the same question. I've obviously only been here 9 months in Canada, so trying to understand how everything works. I'm obviously still getting the hang of everything. But to me,
how did it benefit you in your region on your project?
Well, as I said, where we are right now, forestry has forestry roads going all through the area where we're at. Which goes right past our project. So it enabled our geologists and everyone else to be able to access site easily, where we and save costs. Obviously, if there was no roads going in there, we'd have to do a helicopter exploration, which obviously then is very expensive type of exploration work. So having the roads going directly to the projects is fantastic. And love to be able to work with forestry to obviously help clear some of our lands. That will work really well.
Thank you. Next question to Mr. Steiber. So you were previously, well, I'll give you the opportunity to continue on your answers, but you previously managed BHP and Ekati Diamond Mine in the Northwest Territories. Now, that was a different time. How would you explain the changes with Bill C-69 and how complex and
So,
just give you an opportunity to continue on what you hadn't finished?
yeah, so again,
What we could do to improve.
okay, so immediately repeal the C-69, that's from my perspective, specifically provincially contentious components where there's overlap, including review criteria, review participants, who's included and why, the definition of those, review the timeline, the mandatory obligations for climate, gender, and identity issues. Those have to be curtailed, removed, or adjusted. The federal minister's discretion of final say and replacement of existing boards and regulators by the impact assessment agency, so usurping some of the roles there. Initiate a federal descope and replace with extreme rigor of accountability to timelines, and consider outsourcing to private project management consultant for execution under Canadian government oversight. Reduce the potential for Canadian government to pick favorites. Inspire and lead the call for business and the regions to move forward based on guaranteed federally accountability to timelines and existing regulations. And again, I give Ekati as an example, a 5-year timeline versus a 10 going to 15-year timeline currently. So, and it's not like we did anything wrong as far as development 30 years ago. Obviously, things have improved. A lot of things have improved in terms of energy efficiency, relations with people, First Nations. All of those were included. But I might add, those First Nations in the Northwest Territories, when that industry came about, the diamond mining business, there was only one post-secondary graduate in the First Nations communities affected by the mine when we started. There's 28 annual post-secondary graduates in the affected communities. So you have to have that anchor, that attraction, as you keep using that word. You have to attract the people, moth to a flame sort of scenario, to move people forward, the economy forward, the process. And it's not top down. You know, the initiative, the idea, the leadership, inspiration has to come from the top if it doesn't come within naturally from a lot of our people in leadership in the regions. But after that, the industry's very, very well versed in working through these issues in a positive way. I might add too, again, we talked about the processing. Again, Canada, used to have an abundance of smelters, places like Flin Flon, Thompson in Manitoba. British Columbia had 12. Today we have 2, an aluminum smelter and a lead zinc smelter.
Thanks, Mr. Stibbard. We're going to go on to our final speaker on this round, Mr. Hogan, and then we'll thank our witnesses for their testimony today. Mr. Hogan.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair. There does seem to be common themes around infrastructure, capital, regulatory easing. I really do hope we keep Mr. Millett's comments about logging roads in mind as we go through this study and the next one. I think they're excellent. Forestry is an integral part of this. I'm sure all witnesses will be heartened to know there's broad agreement on the need to move faster. The Prime Minister has set targets to that effect that still would meet Canada's expectations and the court's expectations around environmental, social, and Indigenous components. Mr. Tory, I wanted to take advantage of your long resume and ask if you can compare and contrast the Canadian approach with Australia's, and in particular, identify what Canada can learn from Australia. And I'm not trying to get you in trouble with your countrymen, so feel free to frame it in the positive. But I'm wondering if you'd be comfortable sharing what you believe in Australia is working well and what we should be careful about.
Look, I'll be honest. I don't think there's too much of a difference. We struggle with the same things in Australia around permitting and environmental issues and Indigenous communities, it all means that mining projects themselves are taking longer and longer to get permitted and to get up and running. So when you're asking, who does it better, I don't think anyone's doing it better at this stage. I think both countries need to improve, and we need to improve to get those permitting timelines as short as we possibly can. As I said, but my morals are very much around you have to do it in a very environmentally friendly manner and make sure you bring the community along with you. And if you can demonstrate you're doing that, you should get to the top of the pile and make sure that these things do happen quickly.
Totally agree. And I'm wondering specifically, one thing that we've heard a bit about is Australia's well-funded mapping of critical minerals and the deposits that exist. And we peer over the fence and we view things through rose-tinted glasses. So if there's lessons to be learned there, I'd love to learn them. If there's cautions there, I'd love to hear those as well.
I've got to be careful. The Australian government's done a good job in trying to pick winners in relation to the way that they're funding people. Not necessarily sure that they've done it the right way, but they're putting a lot of money into limited companies. I'm not sure that's the right approach. And I'm not sure it's the right approach to give money to existing companies that have their own cash flows and can actually fund themselves and do things. What they've got to do is more look at funding some of the up and comers and the more junior companies. And to me, if they went through a wider range of companies, sure, they're not going to pick winners every time, but at least they're going to potentially get someone up and running that's not actually going and get a brand new deposit happening. So I don't know. I look at it and I just go, yeah, I think funding big companies is not the way to go.
Yeah, fair ball. And actually, that does lead in with just my last one. I'll try to be really quick. You and Mr. Goda both noted the high risk nature of exploration and being a junior. I'm putting in quotes because you put it in quotes, right? Other witnesses have said similar things. I'm just, I was intrigued by Mr. Goad's comments around filling the gap through different allowable expenses. I'm wondering if either of you very briefly can just give your thoughts on how we can increase access to capital uniquely to juniors and exploration companies.
You're talking about you as a government itself?
Yes, I'm sorry, a government.
Yeah. Look, to me, I mean, whenever I talk to potential investors, they always ask the question, what support are you getting from your government? What support are you getting from the provincial government? What support are you getting from the federal government? And, if you can say, yes, they're looking at it, they're looking to support us in X, Y, Z, you're getting far more positive answers than you are if you're going, oh, no, they don't have any money to give us or they don't want to support the industry, right?
Mr. Goad, do you want a short comment? We've got about
sure
40 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. Essentially, the problem with the capital market system right now is that we just don't make money in mining. And that's because we've been having poor returns on our investment. And there's a lot of issues around that, mainly the regulatory issues that we've already talked about, but there's some others. For example, the charter banks control the brokerage and the capital markets basically in Canada, and they don't allow investors to invest in junior companies because of compliance issues. Our pension funds don't invest in Canadian equities, and let alone junior equities. That's a problem. We basically have to make the industry more profitable. Part of that is through getting our projects through the regulatory system quicker, and making our industry profitable.
Good place to end, Mr. Goad, and we've got another panel waiting. So let me thank all of our witnesses. A very stimulating round of presentations, questions and answers. We really appreciate it. And again, if you have other information you'd like to convey through a brief, we'd welcome it. So thank you very much. And colleagues, we are going to suspend for 5 minutes. Just bringing this meeting to order once again. Just a few comments for the benefit of our witnesses online on screen. So for those of you participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. And please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Also at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. And for those in the room, and there aren't any, you can use your earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair, and I would like to welcome our witnesses on the second panel. Kelly Levis, Vice President, Industrial Products at CN Rail. Also from CN Rail, Chris Cariglia, Director of Marketing, Metals and Minerals. Réjean Girard, Geologist, IOS Geosciences. Louis Ouellette, Président, Union des Préfets, Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. And finally, Daniel Alessi, Professor at the Department of Earth Sciences at the University of Alberta. You will each have 5 minutes or less for your opening remarks, and we are going to start with Mr. Levis or Mr. Levy. You have the floor. It's Ms. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, and apologies if I pronounce your name incorrectly.
No problem, no problem. Well, bonjour, Monsieur le Président et membres du comité.
Good day, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Kelly Levy, and I am Vice President, Industrial Products at CN. I am here today with Chris Cariglia, Director of Marketing, Metals and Minerals. We're delighted to have this opportunity to discuss the crucial role of logistics in promoting the emerging sector of critical minerals in Canada. These minerals like lithium, nickel, copper, and rare earth elements are essential to modern technology, to economic growth, international security. Yet, the supply chain remains vulnerable to disruptions, specifically in remote regions where infrastructure is limited.
Mining companies and shippers early in their development cycles to ensure we can support the movement of ores and concentrates as soon as they come out of the ground. We've identified over 50 mine projects across Canada and the U.S. Midwest with major volume potential in northern Quebec, northern Ontario, Manitoba, British Columbia, Michigan, and Minnesota. Many of these sites are in areas where building rail infrastructure would be prohibitively expensive. To address this, CN is focusing on strategically located transload hubs as key locations across our rail network. Many of these northernmost points of our network. But we are also exploring other sites based on demand and are committed to working with Indigenous partners to own and operate these facilities, ensuring inclusive economic development. These hubs enable truck-to-rail transfers, bridging the gap between remote mines and the national transportation rail grid. Port access and storage are also critical. While Canada's domestic market has growing demand for these minerals, North American processing capacity for less traditional raw materials like spodumene is still developing. In the interim, access to international markets is essential. Our logistics model supports movement from mine to rail to storage, then break bulk shipping via global ports such as Halifax, Montreal, Quebec, Trois-Rivières, Vancouver, and in the future, Prince Rupert. From a policy perspective, there are two areas where government support could accelerate progress. First of all, railcar manufacturing incentives. Nearly all ore and concentrate moves in privately owned cars. There's an opportunity for government to support mining companies in the sourcing of railcars built in Canada using Canadian steel, strengthening both the mining and manufacturing sectors. Streamlined mine approvals would be the next. Streamlining or simplifying regulatory approvals would help bring projects online more quickly, allowing Canada to capitalize on its resource potential while maintaining high environmental and community standards. Thirdly, strengthening Canada's labour frameworks. Canada's labour relations climate is increasingly unstable, threatening national productivity. Strikes in critical transportation sectors, marine, rail, and aviation have severely impacted supply chain reliability. These disruptions slow the movement of goods, undermining Canada's ability to maintain a productive economy, meet global trade demands, and credibility as a global trade partner. A modern framework that includes effective enforcement and real incentives for timely resolution is essential to safeguarding Canada's economy while maintaining fair labour relations. On top of this issue, there have been unintended consequences of labour regulations, like the stacking of sick leave and personal leave benefits and duty rest period rules that have seriously reduced employee availability and forced CN to hire 350 to 400 additional employees. If we want to grow our economy, we need to address these byproduct of policy decisions. CN currently transports over 41,000 carloads of critical minerals annually. By 2032, we project the potential for significantly more volumes, which could represent 15,000 to 25,000 additional carloads from emerging minerals like lithium, cobalt, graphite, rare earth elements, as well as new sources of copper and nickel. We're evolving our equipment and services to meet this equally evolving demand, from raw materials to future battery chemicals, developing new solutions like rotainers on flat cars, and expanding our use of covered hoppers, gondolas, and bulk containers to handle products at various stages of refinement. In closing, CN is committed to being a reliable and innovative partner in Canada's critical mineral strategy. With coordinated planning, infrastructure investment, and strong collaboration between industry, Indigenous communities, and government, we can build a resilient supply chain that positions Canada as a global leader in the energy transition. Thank you, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Levy, and you were right on the money there at 5 minutes, so thank you so much. And on to Monsieur Girard. You have 5 minutes.
Bonjour, je vais m'adresser à vous en français si vous me le...
I'll be speaking in French, if you'll allow me. First off, thank you to the members for the work that you do. I have a great respect for the job that you do in Parliament. I've been working in mining exploration for over 20 years as an independent advisor, and I will have to shorten my presentation, so my apologies to the interpreters. Canada is recognized for its expertise and leadership in mineral exploration. The problem is it sort of stops at exploration. We have a real hard time bringing mines to production. I think this is something that the previous presenters spoke to. You've got to remember that the only way for the industry to make money for society is ingots. It's only when you actually produce the minerals that you make any money. I've had an opportunity to work on a number of hundreds, actually, of projects that started at a feasibility stage. And after 42 years, actually, in the end, none of those projects were completed. In Quebec, the last critical mineral project, if you put aside gold, nickel, was something that is older, that has to do with graphite. And the other projects were never born out. So clearly, I can state that we have a problem here. When you develop a project, development costs are too high to justify things given the profitability situation. The mineral, the deposits are not huge. Lithium might be 50 to 100,000 tons. This is not huge in terms of a mine size. Development costs can be dozens of millions for R&D, 20 million for metallurgy, the feasibility, the environmental impact assessments. So you're looking at 30 million. That works rather well. The problem has to do with feasibility. The environmental aspects, the acceptance process, the markets, all of this comes into play, and at the end of the day, you have to start all over. The cost of developing a project at the end of the line can rise to 90 to 100 million. In the Saguenay, 100,000. Other phosphate projects at others are at 100 million, and they never come to fruition. If it costs $100 million to do the studies and the end result is going to be something that brings in 500 million, there's a problem. The only way for businesses to get through this, I mean, a junior company just can't make it. It's unrealistic to ask a junior company to go through all of those financing or funding hoops. There's a whole issue relating to major partners, multinationals have to get involved. And we've had problems in Canada. All diversified mineral exploration has disappeared. Inco, Falconbridge, and others no longer on the market. There are very few players who can take unusual or uncommon commodities and actually turn something into a profit. One of the problems with the junior companies is that most of them lack expertise to really complete projects, to deal with the environmental and metallurgical problems. You need a lot of qualified expert staff. They need to go through engineering firms. They don't necessarily have the same goals as the mining company itself, which means a skyrocketing of the cost of studies. When you say that metallurgy testing is about $5 million per project, it's to produce the concentrate. That doesn't even include smelters, metallurgy, etc. And to develop these projects, you have to think that involves at least another $100 million. Like the lithium mines, that's been the case, or graphite mines as well.
Professor Réjean, I'm sure there'll be questions that will allow you to speak further about the topic.
Merci. Merci.
And now we're on to Monsieur Ouellet for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. I'm the president of the Union des Préfets du Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean that brings together 5 Saguenay municipalities. Our organization is the spokesperson for mayors of 400 and some municipalities and over 200,000 citizens. We have a close cooperation with our First Nations, Mastayach And this is a model of cooperation that I think should be broadened to the entire country. Our goal is to have a common vision and strong identity to build projects that meet regional needs and national needs, like the Canadian Northern Corridor that our organization is working on. Our organization would like to improve rail service in a region so that we can allow for mineral exploration. In the northern part of our province, we've invested almost $1.3 million to try to find solutions for the current rail lines in our regions to identify the least impactful rail line in our region, and that would be in Chibougamau region. And all of this work was made possible with the cooperation of our First Nation. Geopolitics have evolved a great deal since the American election. The rail project is to us now essential to bring commodities to the oceans, to the western part of the country for those critical minerals that come from Quebec and as well as from Ontario and as well as from the Ring of Fire in Ontario. In our region, there's 160 kilometers where the rail line was removed, but the structures are already in place. The Cree community, through the great alliance that they have been calling for a restoration of this 160-kilometer rail line. We've met with Northern Ontario mayors and met with all the prefects of the Abitibi-Témiscamingue region, and they are very enthusiastic about this project. We believe that we have the fastest and most economical solution to make real our goals in this country for the transport and exploration of mines. This wealth exists, and we can certainly leverage it. People have always been up for major projects. We are the first #1 producers of aluminum in the region, in the country, and we're leading a number of renewable energy projects also, like turbines, etc. We have everything that is required to move ahead. We have a deep water port that's accessible all year long. We have over 1,000 hectares of industrial land to welcome any form of industry. One of our members of Union des Préfets in the Saguenay region says that it could make the profits regional. The military base of Bagotville would mean that our infrastructures are secure and our international partners would know that there is a secure supply. We estimate the investments in our regions could be up to $700,000 for those parts that are in our lands, for those 160 kilometers that are missing. The studies from that Grande Alliance exists, and the work involving reaching out to Ontario has to be done. We believe that to allow Canada to meet its ambitions, we are the most effective, fastest, and most economical means to connect our country to a deep water port year-long with a community that is available to ensure the best, most effective development of our community. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Our final witness, Daniel Alessi. Please proceed. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Et merci de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui.
Thank you for the invitation to appear. It's an honor.
As the world moves towards low-carbon technologies, global demand for critical minerals is projected to grow exponentially. Critical minerals are chemical elements that are essential in modern technologies, whose supply may be vulnerable and which are necessary for economic or national security purposes. Technologies including lithium-ion batteries, permanent magnets, electric motors, solar panels, wind turbines, semiconductors, and other components in advanced manufacturing require these elements. The good news is that Canada has abundant mineral resources, a skilled workforce, and stands to benefit by developing its critical minerals potential. By the government's own account, Canada already produces more than 60 minerals and metals and produces 22 of the 50 minerals that the United States Geological Survey considers to be critical. Our country benefits from a stable political system, a strong regulatory environment that may need adjustment in some cases, as we've heard today, but it also respects Indigenous land rights and has a well-developed mining services sector that I believe has the potential to pivot towards further critical minerals development. These aspects in some ways give Canada a competitive advantage in providing minerals that are sourced responsibly, which should be incentivized and will matter increasingly to buyers, governments, and other partners around the world. The opportunity also exists for us to build vertical domestic production chains. For example, in an area that I have some expertise, a chain that begins with low-grade lithium-bearing sedimentary brines, those found, for example, in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba, British Columbia as well, in the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, taking those low-grade brines all the way to high-grade lithium salts, or if we let ourselves dream a little bit, maybe even to the manufacture of lithium-ion batteries in Canada, producing far more economic value than simply exporting a raw ore. Having been a co-founder of an Edmonton-based lithium extraction technology company between 2019 and 2023, I would be happy to discuss with the honorable members of this committee some of our successes and the challenges we faced there. And also as an educator who's turned out people at the master's and PhD level in jobs in Canada that require expertise in critical minerals, I'd be happy to talk about those challenges in training people in the workforce in Canada at the university level. With increased demand on the horizon, our national development plan at this point is very crucial. Natural Resources Canada noted in their report, or I guess a press release of March of this year, that the demand for critical minerals is expected to double by 2040, and by some of the accounts that I've read, we may experience even greater demand by then. If Canada delays further, it risks being left behind or producing and delivering only raw materials with less economic value. We should also be aware that jurisdictions with less stringent environmental regulations, lower labor cost, or with better developed critical minerals infrastructure may capture more of the market share in the near term. In this regard, the government's announcement this year of a second round of investment in the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund was welcome news. But I also believe our country should pursue invention, innovation, and technology development in this critical mineral space. For example, research into the downstream extraction and processing technologies. This research and development intrinsically attracts top talent from around the world. It results in well-paid jobs, and it offers the opportunity to develop intellectual property, including patents in Canada, that can then be licensed around the world. Developing critical mineral resources themselves also offers, of course, significant economic upside, mining jobs, and other job creation, including in remote northern or Indigenous communities, and a strengthening of Canada's position in the global supply chains. Developing critical minerals resources takes time, capital, and careful consideration of social and environmental impacts. As we've heard in the previous panel, it can take many years for a mining project to begin operations with no revenue until that time. With that in mind, KPMG did a survey last March 2024 of Canadian mining leaders, and they found that while 91% of them are optimistic about the country's position, 98% said that their companies could use more investment, a stable policy and regulatory environment, and incentives, tax incentives. And we heard also that the development of infrastructure in remote regions, the transportation and logistics, the processing and refining capacity itself, if not the technologies that I mentioned, and Indigenous partnerships are also important considerations. And I would add, I think, this point about responsibly sourced and environmentally sound operations are also a must, but dovetailed into reality. And I think that's where certainly academic partners can be useful. The potential benefits to our country are substantial: economic growth, job creation, greater sovereignty, and a leading role for Canada in the digital and green economy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Alessi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And we'll go on to our first round of questions and comments. And we'll start with Monsieur Martel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Oui, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses also for appearing here today. I know Régent is actually in France today, Mr. Girard, that is. Thank you. So I'll start with Mr. Ouellet. In my writing, what's clear is that we want projects, and we want them to come to fruition. I was disappointed. We had a LNG project that would have been in our region. And many people were excited by this project. And I'd say we had assets also to justify our getting it. We didn't get it. We were unhappy about it. But we have to stay optimistic. So now we're talking about a project. That's this Northern Corridor project. I think it's Mario's project. Or anyhow, the prefect, I'm not sure. It's yours? Oh, okay. I don't know. I saw that it was his, apparently. But Mr. Ouellet, I would like to ask you this. That project that you're referring to, why do you find that it's realistic and viable? You think it's viable and realistic. What would lead you to say that? Mr. Ouellet. Thank you, Mr. Martel, for the question. I hope I'll be able to convince you that we are the best thing since sliced bread. In our region, this issue of social license in the region, and that was strong. The issue had to do with the product being transported. When you think that you might be, some people thought that there was a risk of environmental problems in the transport of some goods, and that's why in this particular case it didn't go ahead. But geopolitics have changed, I believe, and economic development vision has changed. It's a trade war. It just has to be said, and you have to respond to this act. I think our deep water port is important to consider. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the St. Lawrence River that is dry in some areas, you look at a deep water port. We have a population in the region that can support it. We already have lines or logging lines and other means to get there. Now we need to bring to fruition a project that I believe is necessary for the Canadian economy, not just our economy in the region. Thank you, Mr. Ouellet. We haven't even discussed the issue of minerals coming from Sudbury or elsewhere, but Mr. Girard, I have a question for you. What do you think of this LNG? Mr. Ouellet said there was an issue of social acceptance or acceptability. Would you agree with that? I think there was a slight issue of social license, but I'm not the best place to speak to that. I think this issue was not in the Saguenay region. I went to Tadoussac. In Tadoussac, there was a storm. It was a major issue because of the belugas and the fear that it might stress the belugas. Look, Mr. Girard, I'd like to ask you this. The Northern Corridor project, yeah, that's what we want to focus on. Because I want projects. I'm trying to stay positive here. Do you believe in this? Do you think it's doable, realistic? Yes, it is realistic. I'm not sure about the economic details of it, but you could talk to CN about that. There was a former corridor, the rail line that used to go through the BTB region that was half dismantled, and it would free up the shipping from east to west towards a port like Saguenay, no problem. In the Saguenay, one of the reasons that was explained to me was that there was an issue of availability of electric current to provide power to these plants. The lack of availability of power in these regions, that's a major stop on these projects. Mr. Girard, social acceptability, could you define what that means? We often hear this concept of social license, acceptability. It's a great term, but what does it actually mean? How would you define it? That one person disagrees and then 300,000 people agree, so you say that it's not acceptable to society? I don't get it. There's what we observe, and then there's my opinion. At this point, we have situations where a single person or a small group of people can stall projects, so the common good is secondary to this interest of a few people or one person. You might be aware of some of these cases, these projects that weren't able to move ahead because of some cottage owners in a region in Benjamin. Or there were a few residents who blocked it. Okay, so a few residents can block any project. And we're trying to build wealth.
For 6 minutes, and then Mr. Simard, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank the witnesses for taking the time late in the day to be with us and answer our question. The question is for Madame Lévy from CN. We heard this idea of a Northern Rail Corridor. I'm an industrial engineer by trade, so I try to optimize everything. And I spent my career doing that. So we have new volumes of critical minerals. I have many mining projects that come and see me in Northern Ontario, Abitibi-Témiscamingue, and Saguenay. That to me speaks of significant potential increase in volume that needs to be shipped within the next few years. We have the port that you mentioned earlier where CN actually is able to bring material these days, currently, are not 12 months a year deep sea facilities. They're more lakers or intermediate, which requires more offloading and unloading. And I'm wondering if you actually, the idea that the préfets are talking about this Northern Corridor that could go from Northern Ontario to Saguenay, if CN has actually studied that, and if CN has updated the volume potential forecast requirements in the future to see how much it would cost, if it would be feasible, what kind of volumes, and is that a better idea than your current network? Depending if we want to ship to international market out of Canada.
Ms. Lévy, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. We review any project that increases traffic on our network as a positive opportunity. To date, no study has been conducted on the costs associated with rehabilitating the corridor between Matagami and Chapet in that northern corridor. At present, it would be very difficult for us to invest capital in this rehabilitation without guaranteed traffic volumes. Financing would therefore need to come from other sources. It's important to note that from an operational railway standpoint, the shortest distance on a map is not necessarily the most efficient or fastest route between 2 points. We do remain open to continued dialogue with stakeholders to identify potential rail solutions that could support the regional growth. And I would say that some of the options today would be feasible using the existing network that we have out there today. As I mentioned earlier, we are looking at many of these different projects based on looking at transloading areas where product could be trucked into a transload and then converted into rail. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, partially. If I was to ask the question to Mr. Ouellet, Mr. Ouellet, what do we need? Who do we need to talk to if the Grande Alliance has done some studies? I think this committee would be more than anxious to get the conclusion. And I'm assuming you also had commissioned some studies for the portion that is within your jurisdiction. Is that correct? And can the committee get access to those?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Our studies are available. We will work to make sure that we get that study from the Grande Alliance, which is that missing bit leading to Chapet. We can certainly provide that. Now, with respect to rail transportation, I was listening to Madame Lévy. I understand that CN is not going to be interested in investing if a project has no yield. I understand, and I'm conscious of that. That's why we need a project office that will do a fulsome analysis of the entire potential sector for this project. And Mr. Girard referred to it, rightly so. The critical mineral business is not big business. They're not major companies. We need to make sure that these businesses can make a profit, and it's interesting to them. The optimized rail line in the Abitibi until the Lac-Saint-Jean region, we have many projects, mining projects, and also forestry projects, because forestry is also in a state of crisis. It also has to pivot, diversify, find new projects. 2x4s that we send to the U.S., to me, is not exactly a positive future. If you think of how we can make our forests profitable, certainly the rail lines are an essential to make these products available.
But why don't we move on to Monsieur Simard?
Merci, merci.
Thank you very much. Just a moment to reply to my friend Richard, whom I appreciate like as much as a brother. It's a regional project that we're talking about that belongs to no one, but is called for by all the stakeholders in the Lac-Saint-Jean Saguenay region. We should not feel like we've been hard done by. We shouldn't have that attitude. It's too bad for LNG. Some people are in favor of it, others no. So the project never came about. But let me use a sports metaphor that Richard will understand. Even though the Nordiques are not back, Richard is still watching hockey. So even if you don't have LNG, you can still think about development and economic development in the region. And what we want to do, what Mr. Ouellet has come to tell us about today is a project that would mean that critical minerals, those various projects, would have infrastructure, deep water ports that would mean that these minerals could be made available to Europe. In previous panels, we heard of people talking about a floor price, a cap for these critical minerals. My question to Mr. Ouellet is, the cost associated with type of infrastructure may be lower than for other types of infrastructure that exist, but another aspect has to be mentioned. If you want to do processing, you need first to focus on the labor force. In the Lac-Saint-Jean region, the workforce is more easily accessible than in these fly-in, fly-out regions in the high north. What would you tell us about that? The Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean has this workforce. I mentioned it quickly. We have 258,000 people in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region that should be in a position to support this kind of an initiative for development or processing in this area. What I'm saying is that a rail line, or at least this link, this road, or some means is an opportunity for a community that wants development. And the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region has forever, since the Second World War, when the decision was made to develop aluminum in our territory. Look, we've always been very inventive so that we could bring real gigantic projects to light. It's the case for aluminum, but I could refer to some of the wind turbine projects that are just huge now in terms of how much energy they produce. With respect to the land's energy capacity, we really are focused. We are very focused on critical and strategic minerals. We want to make sure that our partners in NATO can have access to these minerals. If that's what we want, then the Saguenay port and our people, our knowledge, our equipment, all of this is there to support it. Thank you very much, Mr. Ouellet. Let me get back to our friends from CNRL. In your presentation, you mentioned that you work together with Indigenous nations. And I'm wondering on that point, the Grande Alliance has been working on this project of finishing off part of this rail line, which would link Lebel and Quévillon. I'm wondering if you have had discussions with the Grande Alliance, or if in the past you've had any discussions with them. La Grande Alliance des Cris, so the Cree nations. I myself know. I myself have not had those discussions, but I could get back to you because certainly on our side, we have an Indigenous group that works with the various Indigenous groups, and I could get back to you with some further information to that effect. Based on your comments earlier, your presentation, you don't have any stats in terms of the cost that would be associated with that. I myself, having been involved in this file, and not for a long time, but what I've noticed is in northern Quebec, there's a variety of infrastructure, and it's a user pay model. It's not just one particular group that deploys a project. There's a partnership with Indigenous communities, with groups like you, the CN, and that could lead to there would be the right financing model for this kind of project. Is this something that CN has already done?
100% sure. I do know that we look at working with different groups. We have worked in the past with Indigenous groups, with other partners in different areas to be able to put together projects, but I can't say specifically what has been done with those alliances. Generally, that goes through a different group than what we're doing. We are working directly with the communities. We're working directly with the mining groups that are looking to develop, and then we are looking with the customers that will be looking to purchase the products to see how we can put together, understanding volumes and whatnot that will move through those areas to understand what the investment would be required.
Yeah, that's all the time we have.
Juste très rapidement,
Quickly, if you could table before the committee the assessment process, if you have anything that would allow us to understand how exactly you do this assessment process for this kind of infrastructure, that'd be very helpful for the committee.
A written brief on that, Ms. Levy. Colleagues, we're going to go on to our second and last round. We only have time for three speakers. We got a little bit behind because of the vote and regathering. So we'll have Mr. Martel for 5 minutes, followed by Mr. Danko, and then Monsieur Samar, back to you for 2.5 minutes. And then we have a travel budget to consider, which will be the in-camera portion of our meeting. So with that, Monsieur Martel.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to say this. We want projects. This time, we have to deal with the real problems. If we did not want any projects, we wouldn't be asking any questions. Mr. Girard, I have a question for you. We're talking about roadways, rail lines, but if we don't discuss regulation, if we don't discuss red tape, the deadlines, the delays, the costs, it'll be hard to achieve these things. Everyone is telling us it takes too long, 15 to 20 years. You say the most recent project was 40 years ago, Mr. Girard. I'd like to hear what you have to say to that, because the granting of permits just take forever. There's timing in development projects. You have to seize the day. If you don't see this opportunity, then what does that mean? What would you have to say to that, Mr. Girard? To reply bluntly, it's catastrophic. These timelines mean that companies do not get an opportunity to develop these projects. If someone else does things before we do, then we lost the market, or they lose the market. It's what good is infrastructure if you can't even develop the projects? The main problem is at the provincial level, unfortunately. I'm not sure what the federal government can do, but the project approval process in Quebec is a problem. Mr. Girard, we need to harmonize what's happening at the federal and provincial levels clearly. If both do not have the same goal, the same vision in mind, it's difficult to do these things, right? Yes, 100%. Provincial governments should have guidelines, the federal government too. One of the problems that we've noted at the provincial level is that it's impossible to get the permit for construction so long as every other little detail is not complete. So the process means, okay, you do studies, and if you need to make some changes and you can't get the permit, if you don't do all those studies that need to be done now because of things have changed, and that's what slows things down. In other jurisdictions, what I've heard about Australia, for instance, you do the study, you table those studies, the permits are issued, and they're conditional on you doing these things, but you get the permit right away and you can start. And that means you save 5 to 10 years on the process. That's not how things work here in Canada. As long as everything is not perfect, then we can't move ahead. On mining projects, if there's no processing plant, then our resources, can they be profitable if that? I'll give you an example, a brutal example. This is a cellular phone, right? The material required to make this cost about $10, but we pay $1,000 for these. Could we pay $20 to get the material and save $1,000? Look, the concept of market pricing is critical. Give commodities decent prices, and then your projects will be self-financed. If you want mining projects to go to a certain region, is it what's required? Is it natural gas? Is it rail? It's the difference between the value of what I produce and the cost of production, everything that goes into that. The other aspect is the value of what is produced. If you increase the value of what you sell, you reduce the problem of financing and the cost of production. And it's a myth that it costs more in Canada than elsewhere. It's just as expensive to work in Africa as it is to work here. What we need is to control the costs for these things. It's drastic. I have so many questions. Madame Lévy on the CN. Madame Lévy, what would cause you to want to invest in new rail lines for these new mining projects? Well, to us, volume is what matters. Is there going to be enough volume to justify an investment in rail? Okay, so the project needs to be quantifiable to you? Absolutely, yeah. So today, it's difficult to... You need things that are measurable and
Mr. Danko, 5 minutes, please.
I have a series of questions for Mr. Alessi. First one is leaning on his experience in post-secondary education, the current environment where top talent is avoiding the U.S. for obvious reasons. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Alessi, where does he see the federal role in developing research funding or pilot funding to help recruit and retain that top talent from Canada, from across Canada, and also globally?
Sure. Thank you for the question. There are good programs at the federal level, Tri-Council funding through NSERC, for example. I think the NSERC Alliance Advantage program is an example of a world-class program that many countries don't have, where academics inclined to work with industry can leverage a bit of industry money and get quite a bit from the federal government to support development. And this is something, for example, that does not exist in the U.S. funding environment, so it's quite advantageous. What I would say is the commitment there is pretty small. Some of my colleagues might argue with me. I'm more on the applied geosciences and engineering side of things. But there's a major advantage of companies, I think, working with academics on technically difficult problems, right? Where they may not have, and we were talking about startup or mid-sized mining companies where they do not have a research and development team in-house. They have a sticky problem, and it's, okay, let's get some postdocs on a project that are solving this problem, that are highly trained, and frankly, it's less expensive. But it's a great advantage of then having these doctoral students, having these postdocs here in Canada, being trained, using federal money so that they can go back into the ecosystem. By the way, at the same time, they're presenting to the companies, so they have a link to the company. And, we really like Marcel, we really like Mary, let's go hire her, right? And so these links, I think, which are not terribly expensive in terms, from my perspective as a funding side of things, I've sent many students, as I said, off into companies in Vancouver, Burnaby. Unfortunately, some have left the country as well because they've gotten, there's a salary disparity as well in some of these cases. So some have left for Europe and the United States. But I would start there. And I'll stop, but I just want to say one other thing, and I'm not sure how to solve this. There is still a perception, and I'll let my colleagues correct me if they think I'm wrong, but earth sciences enrollments, for example, have collapsed, and they're just starting to come back a little bit. And I mean, they've gone to a third of what they used to be when I started at the University of Alberta. And a lot of that is around oil and gas is bad, mining for metals is bad. And I think we need to think about changing that perception if we're going to have homegrown talent, working in Canadian companies.
Thank you. Follow-up question on technically difficult problems. So you had mentioned in your opening statement about the need for downstream processing development, and I believe you have a specialty in extraction of lithium from oil field brines, non-standard recovery methods for critical minerals. In your experience or opinion, where would you see this as a growth sector for Canada in extraction from non-traditional methods versus more investment in mining and so on?
Yeah, let me be very frank. The lithium and brine resources in Canada, while vast, are definitely not the best ones in the world. So if you look in Alberta, you've got brines that maybe have, I'll speak in concentration numbers, but 75 parts per million, 100 parts per million. You can double or maybe triple that in Saskatchewan, which is quite good. But there's fluids in the United States, there's fluids in other basins, there's fluids in South America that are much richer. So I think there is a game to be played there in developing technologies to extract those lithium, for example, and other critical minerals from brines. But I've been a huge advocate in Alberta for not just thinking about this as a mining project. Why not have a company that's developing technologies somewhere in Canada, wherever they could be placed anywhere, but develop patentable technologies? And then you'll have a group of highly educated engineers and scientists and people running the business as well that can then license that technology not only to other Canadian companies, but outside the country. So I think it's part about, we lack a technology-oriented sort of industry, I would say, in that regard, certainly in the oil and gas sector historically, but now in critical minerals, where I would be reticent to see us go down the road of, we get an ore out, we process it to some sort of rough grade, and then we send, in this case, it would be a concentrated fluid that contains lithium. Let's ship that overseas where they have electrolysis plants or where they can produce lithium, the battery salts and make all the money making the lithium-ion batteries or other products. And I think that's a risk for sure.
Thank you both. Finalement, Monsieur Simard, 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ouellet, earlier there was this issue of social license, but I think today people in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean are very enthusiastic about a corridor project that would mean that Port Saguenay could be an area for these critical minerals, specifically for processing and other things as well. There's a strong consensus. Now, the problem is, and we've heard people say this, the major challenge in developing mining projects in the north is due to infrastructure. You yourselves have done the work, and you presented the conclusions of a study that you produced with all of your colleagues in the Union des Préfets. You yourself have done the work. Now, to develop this kind of infrastructure, what can the federal government do to facilitate things for you? Many things, many things. But what we need is this. If our idea speaks to people, if it seems like an important key for our country to develop, to go further, to look at the feasibility, well, We need this project office that will mean that you can convince Madame Lévy that potential clients will come and support even our work. I know the Canadian government has invested a great deal for a line that could have gone to Bécomo. There's no line. There's no rail line. But there used to be in our region. There used to be, and we have plans to rebuild what's there. What we're thinking is that we need support. You've got 5 prefects in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region that are prepared to do the work. We need support that will allow us to make sure that the users are there, that feasibility can be done, that communities agree with the project, and then just to move all of this forward. And then we'll have something that will be a one-stop shop. We could say, we're the best project available to the government. It won't happen overnight, but we need to have vision as to what we want for this country. This is for our country. It's a necessity to diversify our markets, to get our resources out without going through the U.S. I think what we have to offer is very interesting, but we need support.
To all of our witnesses, a very thoughtful, lively testimony, good questions by colleagues around the table here. And colleagues, we'll suspend because we're going in camera to discuss the travel budget for the upcoming trip. I will suspend.
you.